and if you could change anything about the BIA processes and procedures or regulatory requirements, what would that be? What changes would do you think would make the processes of some of those transactions that come in front of the BIA for decisions simpler, something streamlined, as I said? I mean, it could be anything, you know, like Patty had said early on, you know, regarding fee to trust, right-of-ways. Maybe you have questions or concerns on rights of appeal and why it takes a decision so long to be processed. And I know throughout the years we've had fee to trust, bringing land into trust, take a long time, sometimes years. Sometimes it has to do with the environmental processes. Sometimes it has to do with other natural resources. So I'd really like to have this an open communication. Discussion items could, you know, I encourage talking about the forestry programs or transportation programs, any of those processes that we deal with on a daily basis. I will say this, when our new principal deputy for Indian Affairs started in his position, one of the things that he had mentioned early on was, you know, streamlining and making the processes a much more simpler. And he has been taking questions, and I know we've posed several from the regional office as well. This year, we've brought up additional ideas on streamlining NEPA, for example, just recently. So those are the types of discussions I think this roundtable we should be having during this next couple hours. So I'm going to turn it over to Patty to go ahead and open up these discussion items. If she has any additional opening statements, I'll let her go ahead and do that now. Thanks.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect.
Yes.
So I just wanted to let everyone know too that I am recording this session, so we can look back on it and reflect and hopefully grab some good ideas to bring forward and recommendations. So just so you're aware of that, we aren't really discussing any of the Midwest procedures at this time, but just a reminder out there, I'm not going to read the entire script, but just a reminder out there that we, if you do hear things that pertain to the Midwest region, and you have questions about that, and you're from another region, make sure that you go back to your local BIA office and ask those questions. Especially if you hear deviations. I know we have, I think, 70 tribes that have signed up for PIA, so there's going to be more tribes outside of the Midwest region, which is great. Welcome. So so the question for this session, and then I'm going to open it up. So and the first one to unmute their mic and speak gets the floor. And that's how that'll work this afternoon. So streamline processes. So this is a roundtable discussion surrounding just one question applicable to all program areas. It could be real estate, could be forestry, it could be the trust process, it could be reporting, OTRO. We're open to hearing anything, any ideas that you may have. So when you signed up for this course, I believe it said to put your thinking caps on, get creative. Let's hear what you have to say. So the question is, with streamlining in mind, if you could change anything about the BIA's processes, procedures, or regulatory requirements, what would you change? So if you could change anything about how we do business, what would you change? And I'm going to open it up right there. Victoria? Oh, I think you're on mute yet. Unmute your microphone.
Hi, I'm Victoria Flowers. I work for the Oneida Nation, and we are a member of the Fee to Trust Consortium. And one of the challenges that I think exists with the current process and the way that things are completed, particularly for the fee to trust, is in the case of completing the all appropriate inquiry requirement relative to the fee to trust process. One of the things that I know sometimes hangs up these processes are the suspicion of a recognized environmental condition. And I think because the tribe has a vested interest in taking care of its land and managing its land, sometimes we're better able to do that once it's in trust. I think if there's a recognized environmental condition, that doesn't stop the process. Rather, it starts a process of engagement and conversation where the tribe says, yes, we are taking care of this, we will take care of this kind of thing, so it doesn't get hung up. The additional thing I'd like to add is that in the case of large tracts of land, to employ the ASTM standard of 2247, allowing for remote looking at the potential environmental challenges that exist out there, and utilizing the online records to support any decision you might make, and reaching into tribal environmental departments to see if they have any complaints or concerns relative to those remote pieces of property. Thanks.
Thank you. Good comments. Anybody want to add on to that? Or bring up a new area? Anybody from within BIA have any recommendations? I see a lot of program people.
This is going to be a really short session.
I guess so. Everybody, don't be shy. I'll bring up a couple areas and then people can just jump in. What about the UFJ for fee to trust? What does everybody think about that?
What does that acronym mean, Patty?
Under federal jurisdiction.
And what does that mean exactly for us as tribes?
It affects your fee to trust application, and it's something that we've been waiting on. Let me just check the attendance. I see we have Diane. I'm looking to see if we have Merville or Russell.
Yes, Merville's on. Why don't we have Merville talk about the history in the past few years and where we're at today, Patty?
Sure, Merville.
All right, thank you, Patty. Without going too far in depth, we are going to have a presentation during the conference with Division of Fee to Trust and Regional Realty that is going to address exactly this question. The changes from the 2014 M opinion, as we call it, moving to the 2019 establishment of those M opinions, and the M opinions are basically issued out of the department's solicitor's office in DC. And what it does is, as part of the fee to trust process, we have to determine whether a tribe was under federal jurisdiction in 1934 or not. The M opinion from 2014 basically indicated that we could rely on what was called the Haas list. And the Haas list is basically a list of tribes across the nation that voted on the IRA at that time. And it's been basically held that those tribes that voted to whether accept or reject the IRA, that took that vote, shows that they were under federal jurisdiction. And that held up a lot in those determinations. They weren't real long. The solicitor's office were able to issue those determinations, and we could keep the transactions moving. Well, up until 2019, when the new M opinions came in, they revamped the entire process on how their office, the regional solicitors, were going to make those determinations. And they had indicated it was supposed to make it easier, but in just the short time that it was in place, it took up a lot of time in order to get those established and get those back. Well, all our transactions had to move through that. And then with the secretarial order coming back, removing those M opinions and putting back in place the 2014 M opinion, we all thought it was going to speed it up. We were going to be back to where we were able to move our transactions along, get those Haas list determinations, keep moving. However, we are finding out that that isn't the case either. What's happening is they're working on them, they're moving them forward, they are getting them to the Division of Indian Affairs Solicitor's Office in DC, but that's what the regions have been given guidance on, is what they need to do. So at this point, we thought that it would speed it up, everything would go, a lot quicker, we'd be back to where we were. But what I believe that they are indicating is that they are going to wait until there is tribal consultation on the 2014 M opinion. And so what that does is it slows down that process. If we could, and we've made recommendation and suggestions that if we can move back to, applying the Haas list, indicating that those tribes were under federal jurisdiction, your applications will move so much faster. But again, right now, we're kind of bound by the way that the solicitor's office is viewing those and what they are relying on before they continue to move forward and issue guidance on making those determinations.
So right now, are you saying, Merville, that nothing is moving forward with UFJs until they hold consultations with the tribes?
Well, from what we've seen coming back from the solicitor's office, they are continuing on doing those. As a matter of fact, we have one tribe where our regional solicitor's office has indicated that they've forwarded that to Division of Indian Affairs, their central office. Now, what we receive back from them, we don't know. We don't know if they're going to indicate, everything looks well, but we have to wait until we have tribal consultation. So at this point, they're moving along slowly, but we don't know if they're going to come back, with something positive that we can move forward with.
So they're looking at UFJs on for tribal entities that have already had UFJs completed in the past. Does that mean that they're going to be doing them on every application, or when is a UFJ good moving forward? Are we even at that point?
Well, I think that is something that we've asked is, if they've already had a determination, can we continue to move forward? Well, what they've indicated back to us in those instances is, even though they may have undergone one, they need to have a new one reviewed based on the guidance that they're receiving.
Right.
So again, what seemed so
it's cumbersome.
Yeah, it seemed so positive when the secretarial order came out that we thought things were going to move a lot quicker, but we're finding out that isn't the case.
So our applications are still being held up by that determination, and I think for our tribes initially in the Midwest, especially those tribes that we've already issued decisions on, that's the question. Why would we go back and have another UFJ when one has already been completed? We've actually issued decisions on those.
Right.
And
I
that,
was just going to interject that, we're thinking that was the case, then all of those would be coming back. On any tribe that has already had a UFJ done, that those would already come back and they would say move forward on those. But those, if they're looking at them, it's slow in coming.
right, and if we don't have any challenges for those particular tribes or tribal entities rather, why can't we just move ahead if we already have a determination? Some of those have already had a couple.
Right.
Why not be able to just move ahead? And then if we run into issues, when we issue the notice of application, if we run into issues, challenges by those outside entities, or even when the decision's issued on appeal, I suppose that's what they want to avoid. We all want to avoid that, is getting to that point to be dealing with the issue, but we should already know if there are issues when we're issuing that decision. I mean, that's really our job, is to figure that out or to make sure that we have those assurances in place. And then if there are any challenges, or if we think that there's something that is out there circulating, or we have a flag, when we request our preliminary title opinion, request that, or look for the concurrence. Look for a concurrence in the existing or to issue a new. And it's at that point that we could identify any flags that we see.
Exactly. And I believe that we've had some of that conversation internally on tribes that have already received UFJs, even prior to these latest ones that came out. And then even though we've gone back to the 2014 M opinion, that have been completed. And that's exactly some of the discussion that we've had, is why can't we just move forward in light of all of those indicators that you had just mentioned?
Right, and I don't know if people realize that in addition to being on the HOS list, that the tribal entities have had to supplement their applications with additional information, sometimes binders full
Exactly.
of information to show that relationship, that there was a relationship at that time, whether they voted or not on the IRA, that they did, that they were having that relationship with the federal government. And, it's correspondence and different activities that help to support that.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna let
Marva, we have a question or comment from Victoria.
Yeah, so am I to understand that each and every application that goes in has to be weighed against that HOS list or that decision?
Currently, that is what they're looking at. I believe that previously, when, if I'm not sure if Russell jumped on or not, and previously, and Diane may be able to respond to this too, is the Division of Fee to Trust, when we knew they were on the HOS list, we knew that they were going to meet that, that threshold, that requirement.
So it was kind of a blanket, right? That once Oneida comes in and we've demonstrated we were on that HOS list and we were, under that agreement, each time we submitted an application, it would not have to go through that particular process. There's a pre-packaged package that goes with it before it goes up to the solicitors. I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around what that actually means and how we can, facilitate some kind of change. Because if there's going to be a consultation around this, and I think with the current secretary and with the current administrative changes, this might be the time for tribes to become very, very active and say, hey, this is an arcane way of demonstrating that we exist as a nation.
Right.
Well, and I guess I want to step away a little bit. The being on the HOS list just makes it more likely, when it wasn't really the only factor involved. It was very helpful. But even then, being on the Haas list, just to make sure that we were able to support any legal challenges. And at the time I was the lead for the consortium after Pacek. And when we had to start doing these supplementing the applications, we did that for each of the member tribes with Fee Trust Consortium, and each entity supported or provided a binder of information, historical information from tribal records that they had to support that relationship. And a review was done at that time. That's how thorough the reviews were done for those tribes. And the solicitor's office even assisted us with review of our language for our notices of decision. So we had the language, we had the binders, we had the review completed by the solicitor's office. So we'd use that information throughout the applications, throughout the decisions that we were issuing. And we get challenges all the time, but there was nothing that had any weight to do or to challenge or to cause any issue. In all this time, we haven't had anything to justify, at least here. I don't know about other regions or nationally what the issues are, and maybe that's some of the information that we're missing. So we were able to use that information, I think, and that's what seems to be a little disturbing, is that back at that time, we went through that large effort to make sure that we had the information was supplemented to the applications to provide and support those decisions with that authority that those tribes were under federal jurisdiction back at that time, the time of the IRA, or yes, which is the time period that we're concerned with. So, and even one or two of those didn't vote on the IRA, I think one of them. So, very comfortable with that until, of course, the political arena changed, where there was more focus and concern with what that meant, because it means something different to everyone, or not everyone, but it does. It means something different to the different political entities and those challenges that we've been faced with. So my concern is that we've done all of that work once. Why would we need to do it again? It's cumbersome and burdensome to the applicants, but at the same time, there might be information that we're missing. So we have taken that to a higher level, just to ask those questions, give our recommendations on the alternatives and what it is that we can do. And that's one of those, worked with Merville, was, if they've already had a review, why would we do it again? Let's make this a part of our preliminary title opinion process, where we can get the concurrence of the solicitor's office based on that information, even if we have to give it to them to look at it again, and at this current time, we have no challenges, we have no information to show any conflict. So looking for their concurrence just to move ahead without having to redo that. And of course, I don't think, like Merville said, anything's going to change. If they're going out for tribal consultation, yeah, you definitely want to consider these things and know what this means. Our tribal partners, you want to make sure that you know what this means, and to you, because it's your applications that are being held up. And sometimes it's been a lengthy time. I think we had some that were going back a year.
So do we have any potential time frame for that consultation? And then once that consultation would come out, do you know if there's going to be some planned webinars to help explain this to people? What it means, what the implication means, and then to provide some real meaningful feedback on it?
Wasn't it the solicitor's office, Merville, that gave us the heads up about the consultation?
Right. And that was in part of their, I think some of their response was, it was kind of tied into one of their responses, that was what I believe needed to take place. Unless Patty or the regional director have heard anything at a higher level, I have no idea when they have any plans for those consultations.
And that's, oh, sorry, Tammy.
I was just going to state that we don't have an schedule. I just I keep a calendar of all consultation coming up, and that's one of them that's not on there. And I've been as well waiting for something to come out on that Victoria, but nothing as of today. But this is a type of forum, Victoria, and any of the tribal leaders on the call today. That, you know, what we're talking about, the UFJ. That can help inform you. So when you are on those consultation call or that particular call, that it'll help bring it to the, or ask informed questions and make informed comments back to the Assistant Secretary's office. So.
Yeah, there's the session that Merville talked about with UFJs. This is an opportunity to engage some of those people at the tribal level that maybe you want to have sit in on that conversation to get more of the detail at that time when we have more of our coworkers involved that have worked on this to more detail. And then at the same time, we also have the session with the solicitor's office. I don't remember the date on that.
So
Well,
this
thank you
question,
for that. Thank you for that explanation. I really appreciate that. And I guess I don't want to belabor this point. I guess one of the other things I want to try to get on the table here while we're chatting is something that I've actually encountered in the FEDA trust process. And this is something relative to the all appropriate inquiry and the jurisdiction that the tribe might have at a particular location. I saw Felix Kittle was on the call, and this relates, my comment specifically relates to a gas station that the Oneida Nation purchased. It had been cleaned up and closed conditionally under a state program. When we bought the gas station, we brought it under the jurisdiction of our Tribal Environmental Response Program that's funded by EPA funds under the statutory authority of Superfund under Section 128A to develop a voluntary response program. One of the challenges that we had with that particular application was the lack of recognition of the tribal technical capacity in administering a closure on that property when it was cleaned up and closed under our authorities. We didn't go back to the state. We didn't tell the state to do it. The EPA concurred with our finding. But I'm just kind of wondering, is there a shift in the BIA FEDA trust process to recognize tribal environmental response programs or cleaning up? And Felix, I think you're still on. If you could maybe provide some context.
Felix isn't in the Midwest region anymore, is he?
No, he's not, but he worked on this particular property at one point in time.
Oh, we don't have anyone else from the region, currently in the region on the call for environmental services?
Scott Doig is not on this afternoon's call, but we can definitely take that note, Patty, if you want to jot that down. And maybe Scott will get on later to the call.
Right, and I brought this up to Scott, and the primary reason that I bring this up is because I'm on a national steering committee for tribal waste and response out of the Office of Land and Emergency Management and EPA. And there's about 15 tribes in this region that have well-developed environmental response programs like we do. And we want to be recognized as the authority. So that's just why I'm bringing it up. If we're brainstorming, I'm brainstorming.
That's a great comment, Victoria. And we definitely we'll have that discussion with Scott Doig, and hopefully he'll get on here. We have a couple hours, so he might be tied up in another meeting. Thanks.
I think actually Scott was at Oneida today.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't see him.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Any other topics anybody wants to discuss or talk about? I know fee to trust is always one of our, and you know, for those of you on today's call, with our division of fee to trust and our current applications we have at the region, we always carry a load of about maybe 250 to 300 applications at any given time. So at the national level, when you think about, you know, at the national, there's around 1,200 pending cases. Midwest carries about 25% of those. So it's a huge thing. And that's one of the reasons why we do have the consortium at the region with our 5 tribes currently right now. So. Alrighty, Diane has brought up the Hearth Act. Diane, if you want to kind of start out with that, maybe give a little bit of backdrop on the Hearth Act, where we are at the region and agencies with that, and what you know on pending cases.
Yeah, I can only speak for the agency at this point in time. I'm not even sure. I know we have one tribe that is currently working through the process to establish their regulation. Just wondering if anyone is running into issues. We had circumstance this past year at the agency level, and I know that we've had conversations at the regional level while I was still the regional realty officer, and that's making sure that we know and understand the Hearth Act regulation process, what it means, and then I guess one of the comments that I want to be able to make, and then just asking if anyone has any concerns or questions that maybe we can help with or take forward while we have people on the call, is just making sure that both BIA and the tribal entity that has the Hearth Act regulation, to make sure that we know and understand what that regulation is, because it is not by any means a blanket. While a lot of the information or creation templates, the process is very, might be standard with some standard requirements, they're not all necessarily written the same. And of course, it's been a process that is living and breathing and changing all the time, where there may be circumstances in the initial Hearth Act regulations that were developed that maybe were not, that found out through the course of things that needed to be tweaked and to be more manageable in the long run or in the long term. So things may be a little bit different for regulation now versus those first approved, but making sure that we know that we need to, when we have questions or we're developing our processes, to make sure that we're going through the regulation so that we understand what those requirements are on both BIA and tribal sides. I have to say, even just in regular leasing, the work that we do with BIA is making sure that we know and understand that those are contracts and that any activities we need to go to that contract. Just because the regs say one thing or another, those are the general requirements, standard requirements, but the lease may be written differently for some reason, somehow, that's specific to that contract or to that process with that tribal entity. So anyway, back to the Hearth Act regulations is, one of the things that I really want to make note of is the Hearth Act regulations is that when a tribal entity has their own regulation approved, that doesn't mean that as of that date or whatever date is determined for the approval or the effective date, that doesn't mean that they just pick it up and they're responsible for it, that BIA, you know, is no longer involved with whatever leasing process is approved in those regulations. The tribal entities still can pick and choose whether or not they want to process any given lease through BIA versus just doing it through their own internal process under the Hearth Act regs. So they can still submit leases to BIA for processing. The one other factor to be very considerate of, and this was kind of a learning experience within the region, is making sure that any pre-existing leases that were approved by BIA still need to be processed through BIA, and any new leases processed under the tribe's Hearth Act, that then they can go ahead and make modifications, adjustments, expirations, whatever, cancellations, whatever they need to do with those leases, what's allowed in their reg, they would be handling it. That tribal entity would be handling it on its end, not necessarily, it wouldn't go to BIA. So just making sure that there is that separation, any pre-existing leases that are in existence that BIA had approved, that any activities on those still need to go through BIA. We do have one tribe that is currently working on, has their own Hearth Act regulations and is working on changing the existing BIA leases, pre-Hearth Act leases, changing those so that they are Hearth Act leases, so that at some point then that tribal entity will have all of the leasing activity. There won't be, they'll be replacing those BIA leases with Hearth Act leases. So those are just a couple of things I think I wanted to make note of. If I forgot anything, if someone else can think of anything, by all means, join in.
There is a
Well-
question out there, Diane, and it's Victoria Flowers, and I know we've talked about this a bit in the past, but there's some confusion about old leases developed prior to us receiving Hearth Act and the need for us to process them under our new authority. Can you talk about that as well?
Yeah, that goes directly to the issue that we experienced at the agency, and that is that any leases in place prior to the tribal entities Hearth Act regulation. So I think what's happened is that they're calling those BIA leases, and then the Hearth Act, those approved under the Hearth Act by that tribal entity, they're calling those Hearth Act leases. So the BIA leases are those old leases that were developed prior to the initiation of the tribal Hearth Act regulation at that tribe. So the work, and in this case, the tribe is a compact tribe as well, which makes it even a little more, throw something else into the mix. So because they've compacted the realty program, they are going to do work, the tribe is going to do work as they did in the past on BIA leases to coordinate, but there is no approval authority there. That all of that is retained at the BIA. The only activity that they would be performing on that BIA lease is under the compact, because they've compacted the realty program, and then processing those to BIA for wherever we pick it up to complete that process for the approval and the approval. So the
Diane,
only leases that the tribe is processing under its authority are those Hearth Act leases that are created under their Hearth Act regulation. So it would be those that new, and then I was talking about these old leases, what they're going to be doing, this particular tribe is going to be replacing those BIA leases with new Hearth Act leases, so that the tribe will have all of the leases at some point in time. There won't be any BIA leases unless they choose to develop new ones.
right, and Diane, I was just gonna add that, I guess, basically what it brings it down to is those old leases can't be grandfathered in and managed by a tribe's Hearth Act ordinance. They can't be grandfathered in.
No, I don't think that's even a part of the discussion and development of the regulation. Correct?
Yeah, in the development and everything, yeah, you're correct. I think I was looking at Victoria's question, and that was basically, there's some confusion about the old leases developed prior.
Yep.
And the need to process them under the new authority, essentially central office. And of course, I believe that the solicitors that work with the Hearth Act ordinances have indicated, no, those types of leases can't be grandfathered in and managed now by the tribe's new ordinance, Hearth Act ordinance.
Right, that's twofold. One is it's unless it's in the regulation, they can't do it because they don't have the authority.
Right.
And then the other is, I don't think it is allowable
Yeah,
to transfer into, to pick that up under the Hearth Act.
right.
They would
I
have to
agree.
replace those leases effectively.
Right, I agree.
Yeah. Did that help, Victoria?
There's another question, Diane, from James Redman. What about when the lease is either renewed or updated after the tribe is under Hearth?
If it's a Hearth Act lease that was created by the tribal entity with their own regulation, they can renew, update whatever they need to do with whatever it needs to do with those leases. If it's a BIA lease, any and all activity still goes to BIA. As long as it's a BIA lease.
So
I agree.
You're saying that even if a lease runs out and they renew it, once they're a Hearth Act tribe, that it stays with BIA?
No, if they.
That was my
They
question.
would have to replace it. They couldn't renew it under their Hearth Act. They would have to initiate a new lease. And that's what the tribe is going to be doing, is initiating new leases so that they will be Hearth Act leases.
Okay.
Because the lease was approved under BIA, if it's going to be renewed, it would have to be renewed by BIA or replaced with a Hearth Act lease.
Okay.
Yes, Victoria, such as canceling BIA leases and replacing with our own. That's the direction that the tribe is taking. So then BIA will be out of the equation.
And I get to do more work.
Yeah. Job security.
And just a reminder too, Hearth leases are for leases on tribally owned land, not a lot.
Correct.
Yep. So, leases on a lot of land would still require BIA. All right, good discussion.
Patty, can you explain that difference, please?
Sure, for tribally owned, it just goes back to the ownership. So a tribe owns a parcel 100%. That's a tribally owned tract. Hearth Act would apply to those, and if the tribe had approved leasing regulations, the tribe could approve leases on tribally owned. However, allotments may have multiple owners, where the tribe may own a fraction or an interest in it, where there's other owners. So Hearth Act would not apply to those allotments. Those would require BIA approval, and that's where we get into, a majority consent requirements and fair market value, rents and things like that.
And just to add to that, Patty and Victoria, I believe that that's written in the act itself, that it applies only to tribal land.
Yeah, leases of tribal trust lands.
Okay, great discussion. All right, anything else with regards to realty program, leasing, rights of way, lands into trust, other types of conveyances? Does it apply to buyback lands? The buyback? Does it apply to buyback land?
I'm talking about when you were talking about the allotment lands. So when the BIA comes in and picks up all the fractionated interests, right?
Mhm.
And puts them together in one clump, then can you explain how that works?
Sure, so it goes back to ownership. So if the land buyback program was able to purchase 100% of the interests out there, and now the tribe is on that title status report, and it's only 100% or 1/1 interest in that tract, then yes, Hearth Act would apply to that as 100% tribally owned. But if there's just one other owner on there, that would, if the tribe does not have 100% ownership, then Hearth Act does not apply. So it could apply to buyback lands if the tribe was able to reach 100% ownership. All right, so let's get back to the question. If you could change anything about the Bureau's processes, and streamlining, regulations, policies, procedures, what would it be? And so far we covered lots of things in, the fee trust area and real estate leasing, which is great because those are initiatives. Taking lands into trust again is an initiative. Let's see, hand up and Tammy.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I was thinking, Patty, I also have another area but I would like to open up for discussion. I know Matt is on here, Matt Anderson. Matt, can you give us an update on where we are with TAM's forestry operations and what the group is doing?
I can give an update, but there's not really a whole lot of updating to give. The Timber Sale Operations Group is a group of volunteers nationally who works on various forestry initiatives. Their main focus right now is updating our older 15-year-old timber sale handbook and trying to get that so that it reflects current practices and requirements. But they also spend a lot of time working on providing support for the contractor who provides training in TAMs, because that's a requirement of the training contract that we provide subject matter experts, because forestry's processes are rather arcane. But the group also develops enhancements for TAMs, and a couple of those have been in the process of being initiated for quite a while, and honestly, I have not seen anything come through in this calendar year that is any different than what TAM's forestry was previously. So I know that there are things that are in the works, but I just don't think that anything has really been initiated yet, or implemented rather.
So the history, or I shouldn't say the history, but going forward with TAM's forestry, are there any upcoming discussions on that? And has the principal deputy assistant secretary been informed on where we're at today? Do you know?
I don't know if the level of detail that the group operates on filters up to that level. All we're basically trying to do with TAMs in forestry is to automate all of our non-automated processes, trying to get TAMs to be as much of the black box for forestry that it is in some ways for realty. Our business doesn't allow us, for instance, to automatically generate invoices periodically, because we don't do that kind of billing. But if we can enter some basic information about the contract and have TAMs generate a completed contract form for us, that would be a great leap forward. This is basically the same vision that was laid down during the formative years of TAMs in the late 90s. Bob Ford was a former employee at Great Lakes Agency who was very instrumental in developing that vision. Tom Corbin in Rocky Mountain region and several others. Tom Magnuson when he worked in Washington. That hasn't really changed, and the group that's working on TAM's forestry currently is pretty much following the same template, just kind of switching the order of certain things as TAM's itself has changed.
And how do you see this affecting the tribes, Matt?
Our hope is to make TAMS so user-friendly that it actually, I don't know, gives back rubs and foot massages and makes a mean cup of coffee so tribes really want to use it. Part of the hesitancy in tribes in adopting the use of TAMS, I think, has been because of the complexity of the system, in particular the complexity with regard to forestry, which, as I noted already, is already a complex process. So we're trying to make this as much of a black box, single button to press as we can make it. And ultimately the goal is for the tribes to be doing all of the TAMS work instead of all of that being left at the BIA agencies or the regional office. We are happy to help out, but it is a much stronger statement of self-determination if the tribes are doing all of the work themselves.
And do you believe that there's going to be a consultation on this, or is it going to be a matter of just training? And what do we do here at the Midwest region to ensure that the tribes are successful in this transition?
I think one of the last things that would ever happen is that TAMS would be shoved down anyone's throat, except the bureaus. It's already down our throat. The tribes will be offered the use of TAMS if they care to use it, and I know that there have been several tribes in our region that have expressed interest, and we provide training for them as that happens and try to just make them as ready to use the system as possible. And that's probably always going to be the case. There's probably always going to be something of a hybrid model between the tribes doing the work for themselves and the Bureau doing work on behalf of the tribes because of either, I don't know, a vacancy at the tribal level or the tribe just doesn't want to take that responsibility on. It is the Bureau's system of record, and because of that, ultimately, it's something that we can't pass on to tribes to do. Well, they can do it, but it still falls to our responsibility to maintain the official record of our trust transactions. And so it's something that we know that we're going to be living with for a long time. But again, our whole purpose is tribal empowerment, and if tribes are doing the work themselves, that's realizing our goal. So we will continue to do as we have been doing the work that we need to do and supporting the tribes in doing that work themselves as best we can.
Alrighty, so we have a couple comments and questions for you, Matt. I'm going to go with Patty Albee first.
Okay. Yeah, so Matt mentioned TAMS, and I guess this really wasn't directed towards Matt or even forestry. It's about TAMS and tribal TAMS users. And that's an area that I think needs to be improved. The process to getting a tribal employee hooked up on TAMS access, with TAMS access and a BIA computer, and the maintenance of that BIA computer when it has to be plugged into a network to get the updates, is a problem area. For one, we have to do the background investigation to get the tribal user access to the DOI network. For one, that takes a long time and it costs money. Oftentimes, there's turnover at the tribal level. By the time we get one person on and ready to go, maybe that person has vacated or moved on within the tribe to another position, and it seems like we're always one step behind. Also, we don't have the equipment for the tribal TAMS users is often outdated, and it seems that they're not on a recurring replacement, and I think that's something that we could do better at. But also maybe looking at streamlining that process so it can happen a little faster. I know we keep trying to push TAMS, maybe not down the throats like Matt had said, but push TAMS out to the tribes for them to use, and we've been successful in doing that. And our tribal counterparts have been very patient with us in getting that to them. But there are issues out there that I think that's an area that we could look at possibly, and maybe streamlining some of that process. And I know today we're not going to fix anything, But I thought it would be good to have just to capture this thought and maybe look at it, closer in the future. That's all.
Yeah, those are good comments, Patty. And I know that we typically include the tribes on our rotations for purchase of computers, the TAMS users, on a 3-year cycle. But I don't know how standard that is throughout the region or not. And I know that we face challenges in going through the process. As a matter of fact, that was some of the recommendations that we had sent forward on some of the impacts of that, is that we're unable to maintain a consistent process for obtaining those accesses, who to contact, what we need to fill out, how we need to coordinate that. So that's something that the region, just letting the tribes know, that's something that we're pursuing to try and implement those standards at a national level so that it is more effective, streamlined, and efficient in moving through that process, as well as, including that consideration, Patty, of purchase of the equipment that's necessary too. So I had a question. Or were you gonna say something, Patty?
Yeah, I see, Chris has a hand up too.
Yeah, so just from experience with the Seminole Tribe of Florida, we started the process of getting the folks in their realty department and mortgage and so forth into TAMS. It was interesting, but I think at least 2 years I spent trying to get this set up, and that's getting them their cards, government PIV cards, and keeping that updated. It was funny watching them try to keep up with some of the things we grapple with ourselves, and that's making sure, we take the annual training and do the other things that are required. That was one issue. The other issue is tribes grow and tend to move around. IT has to approve the location that these computers go in, and whether or not they're set up right and all of that stuff. And so that's the other issue. I just know that, and I totally agree with what Diane was saying, that the streamlining part of this, if we can help, and it wasn't totally on the government, wasn't totally on the tribe. It was just trying to get everybody, number one, get their PIV cards, keep them updated, and then get things moving along to where they could actually use TAM. The other thing is education. The tribes don't always understand, or are not always told to what level. And there was another comment made that they have to participate under Hearth, and that what kind of requirements it's going to take with. And tribes are in a lot of cases no different than we are. They're short-staffed. They have they have needs in that regards. Are a little bit afraid of what's this going to mean if we have to start using TAMS ourselves, and is it time intensive or labor intensive and so forth. So just some observations going along with what Diane said.
Diane?
I raised my hand because I had comments going back to Matt up here. So for Matt, what about the data issue with software changes? Where are we at with reinstituting the software that was lost? I'm talking about the Microsoft Access Program issue that affects stand exam and forest inventory data. I know that we're moving towards a new system. Is that supposed to replace that?
Yeah, let me talk about that. That's a completely different issue from TAMS, although
Yes.
it's something that is forestry related.
Yep.
Okay. From the late 1980s, the Bureau worked with tribes to adopt a program that had originally been developed on the Menominee Reservation called, well, it's had various names. The most current iteration of it is Operations Inventory. And this is a repository of forest inventory data that we use in stand exams, which are certain kind of ground-based inventory, spatial inventory that we do. Go out, put in a plot, measure trees, and move on to the next one. That system, however, hasn't been updated in quite a while, and the most recent update that we had in the Windows software, going from whatever the previous version of Windows was to our current version, I think the current one is version 10, we were no longer able to use our previously functional software. In fact, we had to make exception requests against being upgraded on certain computers to Windows 10 so that we could continue to run our old antiquated software. We have been for a long time, at least 10 years that I'm aware of. I've only been at the region for about 10 years. Been working on a replacement for Operations Inventory, and that one, I think it was, I don't remember which superintendent this morning mentioned that we speak in acronyms, or maybe it was our budget officer. That one's acronym is SEERS, Stand Exam Inventory Reporting and Statistics. That has been in process for, as I said, quite a long time, and we are currently running through the gauntlet of getting approval from Bureau of Indian Affairs IT Security to have that program hosted on a BIA server. This past week, last week, we jumped through one of the remaining hoops of having the security officer assessor assigned by the Department of Interior issued his report of findings of these various criteria pertaining to the security of the new proposed system. And now that we have that final report, we can work on addressing the concerns and getting to a point of decision as to whether or not this system can be hosted on a server, a BIA server. And so that's, I feel like we're in the downhill portion of this now. However, that doesn't mitigate the fact that we are still trying to keep this old system, Operations Inventory, which does not work on Windows 10 or works very poorly, functioning. In addition to that, Operations Inventory is something that is based in Microsoft Access, and BIA IT Security pulled the use of Microsoft Access to all but certain users about 2.5 years ago. And now there's a very arduous waiver system that we have to go to be given permission to use Microsoft Access on our computers. So that's kind of where we're at right now, is between a rock and a hard place. We have various workarounds, but the workarounds in some cases are more difficult than it would be to set up a completely new system on paper or using an Excel spreadsheet. So we are doing our best to muddle through and get SEERS across the finish line. When SEERS is done, I'm not going to say that it's going to solve all of our problems, but it'll at least give us a functioning modern system again. And that's where all that is.
And I know for a fact too, Matt, that it's been, thank you for that, it's been at least 10 years or more. It was certainly a high-level issue when I was up in DC as the Associate Deputy Bureau Director for Trust Services. And the frustration is just very apparent in dealing with this and trying to get to where we need to be. And then I think the loss of Microsoft in the meantime has just kind of compounded things. But I think, was I talking to someone from one of the tribes, and they access that data, so their hands are tied as well, unable to use that information that's contained in the stand exam and inventory data.
Yeah, and we've looked at working with tribes as one of our possible workarounds. We've actually worked closely with the Fond du Lac tribe in trying to get a functioning version of SEERS operational on their system, and possibly having them just host the entire system and not have to deal with BIA IT security. But that only got us so far, and BIA IT security imposed itself on us on the process anyway. There's no escaping them. They are everywhere.
Right. So I think this is probably one of the things that we could have. Our briefing that we did was really focused more on realty issues, and it's just because that's where the discussion was. But this is certainly something that I would have welcomed to be included, to bring to the attention for assistance at that level, in some of the efficiencies that we need to build on for, coming directly from the principal deputy secretary, assistant
Yeah.
secretary.
Yes, but I would note also that our issues with operations inventory and with getting approval to run Sears are really kind of self-imposed problems, because there are easily available off-the-shelf commercial products, some of
Yeah.
them quite expensive, that we can use in lieu of these systems. And some of the tribes have decided to do that. Some of the tribes have hired consultants to come up with their own inventory analysis systems. Red Lake is a good example of one. They have a system which, quite frankly, looks really neat.
So who built Sears?
That is something that was a really good idea a long time ago when we started it, and I guess as time has gone on, it's
It
kind of,
outdated itself.
well, no, I mean it's an up-to-date program. We've got, it's being programmed by a retired University of Minnesota forestry professor, and he's
Oh,
an excellent resource. But there are alternatives. What we are developing is something that is going to be tailor-made for use in the Midwest region and easily portable to other regions. We've got Eastern Oklahoma region and Southern Plains region and a handful of others are all interested in seeing this project done, because they'd like to do that, to ride our coattails. But
and I
it's,
think that was the thought. There was so much time and funding involved in getting us to where we're at. No one really wanted to just toss it aside.
yeah. I mean, and I've heard the same argument applied to TAMS. Some people have
Yes.
said we've invested too much into TAMS to ever abandon it. Not that I'd ever advocated abandoning TAMS.
All right, well, thank you, Matt, for talking about and informing everyone on Sears. And we do have a business ownership out of Midwest region here, and I know Matt and our foresters are working diligently with that system every day too. So thank you for that. I want to move on to probate. We have Gwen Johns on today, and I want to see if Gwen could give us an update on some changes going on with the probate system.
Thank you, Tammy. I think that a lot of you know already that the probate ProTrack system, the record of national record of probate, is going to be going away. It's been in the works for quite a few years now, and it's going to actually be going away as of September 30th this year, and it's going to be merged into TAMS. And Mandy was on a call, regional LAS call or national LAS call a couple of weeks ago, and I was on a call with them last week. But what's going to be happening is that there's several key important dates that are coming up, and the next one would be August 2nd. There's going to be a data validation of everything that was pulled from TAMS, and making sure everything is coming across accurately from what I'm understanding. All I know is that it's been in the works for a long time. It's been discussed a long time. I don't know the full details of how it's going to operate yet. But as of August 2nd, there's going to be a data validation, and I'm assuming it's from all the data that was pulled on June 24th from ProTrack, which is going to be moved over to TAMS. So we got a few very exciting time for us to see how this is all going to work out. And And I do believe, yep, Tammy Harris just wrote something. Charlene Roundface is still heading out many of the issues. And I do know there's issues out there. So I don't think it's fully understood what's really going to happen yet. All we know is that it's September 30th. ProTrack will only be readable to us that have access to it. There will be no data entries, and as of October 11th or 12th, I believe, this is going to go live in TAM. So it's kind of exciting to know that there's going to be training. The date that was given was August 16th. And I believe that was for regional LASs. And I'm sure there's going to be something coming out for all the probate staff, the tribal staff that have access to TAMs and ProTrack. There's going to be, I believe there's going to be training for the approvers, which would be the superintendents, deputy superintendents, deputy directors that actually approve the probate cases to go forward. So there's going to be training for a lot of people coming up. They just haven't come out with the dates yet, as far as I'm aware. So I don't know how it's going to operate. I've been thinking about it for years, ever since I first heard about it, and I can't imagine how it's going to work. So, it's just a step-by-step process for us, and it's going to be a very interesting time for us. All I do know is that from September 30th to October 11th, 12th, probate is going to have some downtime there. So, but we're still going to be busy doing a lot of other stuff. So, very interesting time. So I don't know if Mandy wants to add anything to that.
Hey, this is Mandy Priester, LES at the regional office. No, Gwen, I think you covered everything, all the dates that I have as well. So just a lot coming up, a lot going on. And it's also the end of the fiscal year, so we are going to be busy.
Thank you, Mandy and Gwen. We do have a federal partner online that I'd like to see if he'd like to weigh in on. We have the Regional Trust Administrator, Tom Reynolds, on from the Bureau of Trust Funds Administration. Tom, do you have anything that you can speak on regarding the transition period there, and how, if it would possibly or at all affect the beneficiaries or the tribes out there?
Hey, Tammy, I don't have any information at this point. It's something I can certainly look into, but right now I don't have anything to share.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I guess my biggest concern is, how is it going to affect our landowners and their payments? That always concerns me. In particular, if the tribes are looking into pulling funds from the old systems, I should say, maybe TFAS, that type of thing, if it's going to affect any of the proceeds of labor accounts. So, but we'll look into that. And Tom, if you have anything later on, feel free to share that. Thank you.
And Tammy, we will also, if we find any more, we'll be sure to forward it off to you.
Thanks, Gwen. Alrighty, any other comments from our attendees today, or topics that they want to discuss? I know we have a few tribal leaders out there. Do you have any questions for the BIA or ideas, talking points that you'd like to discuss with us? All right, Patty, did you have any other topics that you wanted to bring up today?
Sure, I just keep going back to that one question. If we could change anything within the Bureau right now, what would it be? It's kind of a big wish list. And I just look at the areas where we're having some problems, and I guess, you know, we do have a lot of vacancies right now, and the amount of time it gets, the amount of time to get those positions filled, is a problem, that maybe deserves a closer look at, in finding a solution. And, I just wanted, you know, as a topic of discussion, that I think that that's an issue that could probably, or an area that could use improvement. I don't have the answer today, but just looking around, I think we do have a lot of vacancies, and the time it takes to bring somebody on board. Our onboarding process, I think, could be improved. So that was a thought that I have. And also, I just want to circle back to the TAMS access again. So somebody had mentioned in the comments, and I'm not gonna go back there and read it, but it was basically about the training requirements for TAMS and whatnot. It used to be that, you know, before we had gained access to TAMS, we had to take the, you know, the overview, the 40-hour class, and have those credentials under our belt before we can have TAMS access. And and we had to have a room size of 15 students before we could get the contractor CBI to come and train us before it counted. And the cost, if we didn't have a room size of 15, then they had to travel down to Dallas. And it just seemed that, you know, now that we've been doing things virtually, maybe TAMS could be done in a virtual environment, not, you know, even outside of the pandemic. And maybe it could be through DOI talent and something that we could take on our own time. And instead of having a class size of 15, because sometimes that's hard to do within the same region. Not often do you have 15 people waiting for TAMS access within our region, and I just think it'd be a better idea to do it virtually, DOI talent maybe, on your own time. And that's just a recommendation. And again, I was reminded we're just brainstorming. There's no wrong or dumb ideas, right? So I'm just going to throw that out there. And I see Diane, I think Diane has her hand up. Diane?
Yeah, so TAMS, I don't want to lose that thought. But changes, we need to be open-minded on changes, because I think I heard it said that includes regulation, any process requirements, IAM, whatever, anything that is mandating what we do, how we do it, is open for ideas and possible refinement, because the administration is all for getting the things done that we haven't been able to in Indian country, and making those processes and requirements effective, and streamlining is huge. Efficiencies, you know, whether it's costs or process, whatever it is. So and it was said, no idea is a bad idea. So by all means, even if this forum isn't the place that you want to say something, you know, on the tribal side, getting together with your tribal leader or your program peers and sending those things forward, whether it's to BIA or through other channels on your own. This is the administration, and we have full attention. So, and I know I'm beginning to sound like a broken record, but I just see it as such a huge opportunity. We certainly don't want to miss. And then going back to the TAMS training, you know, the TAMS training, it's always been an issue. CGI has the TAMS contract. They are the only ones. That company we're limited to that company providing the training, because they get paid for it through that contract. So some of the things that we had talked about internally with regards to TAMS training, you know, even in the classes, they're limited to, they have to have at least 15 people to hold a class. At least that's how it was. It seems like they're doing it a little bit differently. They're making the training available and then people are signing up for it. The problem is we have a couple of problems. One is that when people can attend, they don't necessarily cancel, which means that a slot that could have been used for someone else is not being used. And sometimes they've had to cancel because they didn't have enough people or they've gone ahead and held a class with 3 or 4. So there needs to be some kind of refinement in that area and how those courses are being established. And maybe it's not just having those courses with the trainers, but maybe making some of those things available, especially when it comes to refreshers for someone that's already had the overview or had A&D training, but having those refreshers available. I had new staff that started September of last year and is just taking training this week. It's taken them that long to get the training that they need for it to be available because it's not always available. And what really hurts is when you have missed opportunities because there have been training sessions and then maybe people that can't attend haven't canceled. So then where there might have been an opportunity to get in sooner, we're not able to because we don't know that there may have been a slot that was available because it wasn't canceled. So, and I know in some cases it is canceled and then it's at the last minute. So then they're trying to reach out to people and that doesn't work out either. So obviously there's something that needs to happen. You know, if we have any ideas, any thoughts on maybe how we can make that more effective and send those recommendations forward is certainly welcome.
All right, thanks, Diane. I see Gwen with her hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment about the change of TAM. And I know last time in probate, this was like when we moved from whatever we had way back when, and we moved over to ProTrack. And I know everybody is scared, or a lot of people are scared of change. So at that time, I just wanted to make a comment that there was a lot of people in probate that actually retired because they didn't want to go through the change of having to learn a new system. And I just want to make a comment regarding TAM's training for tribal staff. Just to comment that the person that we had was an elder person. And she said, yeah, I had the training, but she was scared to say something because she didn't fully understand what they were talking about. So even though we in probate are not TAM's experts, we did let her know, you know, just how to go around and do what she needed to do. But I do know that TAM's training out there is a topic amongst a lot of people, maybe the older people that really don't want to ask questions. So that's just my comment.
Thanks, Gwen.
You know, that's the other thing, Patty. There's only 3 trainers, or there were 3. At one time, they were down to 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, you know, what can we do? Request from our level moving up to the change management board or something to expand on that so we have more opportunity for training, whether it's the trainers being available and providing the training. It is better virtually because it seems like there's more opportunity than there is, you know, physically traveling to Albuquerque. But at the same time, we're still running into those same issues so that, you know, if there were things that could be made available, recorded activities, or, I mean, there's just so many considerations.
Yeah, and I think one of the recommendations that I would make is that, you know, their contract, you know, CGI is under contract, and I'm not sure how often that is renewed, but amending that contract to include a DOI talent on your own time type of training, where you could go in, they could back up if they needed to review a chapter, things like that. I think that's the way that we learn, and that it would just be more widely available. So one more comment before moving on here. I just want to talk about workforce planning too as an issue within, the government here. We're all on most of us are on the general, schedule, pay grade. So we all have a grade associated. So what happened was, the problems that we're having now, with hiring and doing workforce planning is some of our, program managers have left at a higher grade, either retired or have moved on to other opportunities, leaving the vacancy. What we're finding now is that, we have a missing link where the, program, managers or, branch chiefs positions can no longer be career ladder. And for those of you on the phone who don't know what career ladder is, it would be just that. It would be a slash grade. So if you have your, just gonna pick on realty, if you had a realty specialist at a GS 9 or 11, and the supervisor was a 14, many of our organizational charts are missing that 13, 12, 13, for example, to get to that 14 level. So oftentimes we don't have that career path available within our own organization, and to get to the next level, maybe you have to move or go, maybe even leave the bureau to further your career. So that's a real problem too, and maybe returning those career ladder positions back to a supervisory or program manager position would help in workforce planning. And I think if we took a look at all of our organizational charts, at least within the Midwest region, and I'm guessing maybe everywhere else too, if you're joining from another region, we might find some gaps out there. And I think that's a problem. And I think just asking for those career ladder positions back would be helpful in all program areas. So I just wanted to get that on record so we talk about it or look at it later. Diane?
Yeah, I want to make a comment about the career ladder. A lot of that too is driven by the size of the agency. You know, where you might have upward mobility opportunities, but if someone is at that step to go to that next step, and if they choose not to move to that next step, well, that just kind of defeats the purpose, because it doesn't just hold that person at that level, it holds the people behind them too. You know, we don't have a lot of opportunity is driven by the size of the agency, so there aren't as many opportunities. And that's an example of one where unless that top level is willing to move up, the others behind them are held back at the same time. And then I just wanted to say your comment about DOI talent, that was a great comment. Because there's no reason why the training for TAMs couldn't be in a system or in an environment where the trainings are recorded or set up as those as we experience on those annual trainings where we're not meeting with a trainer. They're already created for us to run through. Because with TAMs, especially with the new modules, the activities are system driven. So the training should be able to, it's just really just navigating through the system, not necessarily going through the process. That's what the handbook is for. But just navigating through the system, so going through the earlier steps completion of steps takes you to those next steps in the system. So there's not a whole lot of thought involved where you necessarily need to have a trainer to have the discussion with. Just thought.
Any other comments? Suggestions? any other program areas that want to speak up? All of your timelines are good. Do you find yourself going through a process or maybe a waiting period or something that you just don't understand why it's there and wonder if it's necessary? I mean, those are the types of things that I would be looking at in hopes of streamlining. Maybe, you know, as Diane had mentioned, you know, this administration is really looking at things and we have their attention and they're asking us for our input. So, if you can think off the top of your head, and we're just brainstorming right now, of course, we have no real answers. We're not going to solve anything. We're not going to change anything today, but at least it's going to be a record and quite possibly into a paper or a briefing that will be sent forward, or at the very least, we will take a look at the regional level. Diane, did you have another comment? Your hand is up.
I just forgot to take it down.
Okay.
Sorry.
How about on the Indian Services side of things, anything in administration, contracting, property, finance, budget, that could be turned down or improved upon in the process?
Is it okay to mention anything about special projects here?
I'll leave that to Tammy.
Initiation, solicitation of special projects. And I was just going to make that note, no one's stopping me. Just that the opportunity is there with year-end funding that may be available for tribes. If you have any projects that you need completed or that you are looking for additional funding for, one-time funding, this is certainly the time to be getting those out. I will be meeting with our tribal leaders, or at least reaching out to them, whether it's having a call or through email, just reminding them, but that doesn't always get to the programs either. So, but we'll be coordinating with the staff too through the programs to make sure that you know that the tribes they know that the opportunity is there for one-time funding for projects due to funds that might be available at the end of the year in the various programs or disciplines.
Victoria?
What's that?
Yeah, my talking about funding, right? You know, one of the things that I think we have an opportunity to do is to look at how some of this year-end funding could supplement some of the funding we receive from our other federal agency partners, because oftentimes we don't have enough funding to complete a project, whatever it might be. And sometimes getting additional funding out of, like, say, EPA is a little more difficult of a process because we don't have the 638 process to get the money into tribal hands. So I'm just kind of wondering, again, spitballing, you said, you know, all ideas are good, you know, if there's a way to give preference to, or at least credit towards a project that maybe has been started by an EPA program, and we want to continue it. Maybe we completed the initial project, but we think, hey, this is really a good idea, for BIA to support additional funding on those kind of projects.
That's a good comment. Thank you. Scott?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that. Hey, Vicki, how are you doing? If there's self-governance or 638, it doesn't matter. If there's a year-end request for a project, submit the request. Leadership got the letter. I mentioned it earlier today. I think it was January 12th off the top of my head. Just submit the request, basic scope of work, budget. There might be additional paperwork to follow up on that. But even if it's self-governance, we can still process that money over through them to you for those projects.
Yeah, it's about what's allowable in our programs, not necessarily what that project. It's not necessarily tied into an EPA project. It's what we're allowed to spend program funds on.
Correct.
Yep, I get that, and I guess I've just received some funding that has been complementary to some of the EPA work. That's primarily the world that I work in is EPA. But yeah.
So you work with the environmental program at Oneida?
Yeah, I'm the environmental compliance coordinator for the Oneida Nation. I do all of our NEPAs, I do all of our Hearth Act stuff, I do all of our FEDA trust, the environmental side of it, and then I work in about 4 different EPA programs.
Okay, so we will be sending out that correspondence out to the tribal leaders again, and then making sure that it gets out to the programs. And natural resources, environmental compliance is one of the programs. So as long as we know who the contact people are, the information should be getting down to your level.
Yeah, we've shifted a lot of chairs on the deck of the Titanic the last couple of months.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, any other comments, suggestions, big brainstorm ideas that anybody wants to share? Okay. Well, if y'all change your mind, I'm open to receiving any of your suggestions by email. Let me put my email in the chat. Although you might all have it already. But, that you want to add to this discussion, like I said, this is recorded and we're taking a look at it and draft up a briefing paper and see what we can fix under our own authority and see what we can move forward as a briefing paper to our senior leaders. And with that, I will turn it over to Tammy if you have anything to close. I see that maybe she is multitasking and away from her desk. So I'm going to ask Chris, do you have anything to say before I close?
Well, I know the focus has been a lot on the trust side, and that's great. That's where we wanted the folks to drive this discussion. I think our current administration is really making new strides over the years. Is just like Deputy Director of Field Operations Bart Stevens stated on the opening comments yesterday. That, you know, talking about the history or past being less appealing subject content than looking forward. I've been in leadership positions with both my tribe as well as the federal government. And the reality that we continually need to grapple with is that tribes know best how to manage their affairs and what service and delivery modes fit them the best. You know, delegations of authority over the years from one administration to the other can fluctuate, where authorization and to actions can be pulled from the field or released somewhat. You know, during my time as superintendent with the Seminole tribe, I remember Chairman Villa commenting that when Congress appropriates funds, sometimes the service vehicle follows a single process and does not allow for the variations among the tribes as far as how they need that. I also appreciate the request by the Self-Governance Advisory Chair, Ron Allen, at the tribal interior budget meeting that we just most recently had, to have tribal involvement, on the White House advisory process. I just think that this administration and the direction that we're going, Deb Howland, some of the other decisions that are being made, some of the push that we see, this is a good opportunity for tribes to provide the feedback, and I think there's now as much as any time or more for them to be able to have some input and be more directly involved, not just through tribal consultation and other means, but having a seat at the wheel, as they say. So that's my comments, Patty.
Thank you. All right, last call for any other comments out there. Let me see if Tammy is back on. Tammy? She's a busy lady. I'm sure she is multitasking. So with that, I want to thank everybody for attending today's session. Diane?
I was just going to ask, is there a place or a means if, maybe someone's shy about bringing something to table in this conversation, that maybe there's some place that they can, a repository or a means of submitting any comments as a follow-up to the session if they have any ideas, comments, concerns?
I put my email address out there on the chat, so they can go ahead and email me if anything comes to mind. I'll make sure that it gets added or to the people that need to review it. Oh, I see Tammy's back on.
I am, Patty.
So yeah, check the chat. My email is there. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tammy for closing.
Thanks, Patty, and thanks. I want to thank everybody who got involved today, and even if you weren't, just listening and maybe taking notes and maybe bringing some things to light for the rest of the conference. We're only in our second day. We've had probably 4 different sessions so far, but we do have about 70. And I just will say, the discussion items we put on the table today, there are some specific courses during the conference that I'll be discussing them further. But as Patty said, our email addresses are out there. Feel free to, if you have any ideas, and even at the end of these sessions, you will get an email from the room facilitators asking for a survey and comments. Feel free to make those comments back to us, so we can just bring those to light with our BIA leadership. We heard yesterday from the Bureau Director's Office, as well as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Economic and Policy, Economic Development, and she had talked about Brian Newland's priorities this year. So think about that and feel free to shoot those up to our office. And you can also go to the Assistant Secretary's webpage as well, and make comments in that area, as well as the consultations that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. And I did give an outline or a listing of those just the other day during our tribal leader call last Monday. So with that, I want to thank everyone for getting involved today. I know we have note takers out there, so Patty will provide those notes, and we will do a summary of the discussion items and bring these to light to, if it's trust, up to our Deputy Director for Trust, Jonna Blackhair's office, and in Indian Services. We'll also move those up forward too. So thank you all for joining today, and I hope you take some time to get into the rest of the Partners in Action courses, and we will see you then. Thank you all. All right, Patty, I'll turn it back over to you to close.
All right, thanks everyone. Still not too late to register for the other courses. Just contact Andrew.Ainsworth. Or if you still have your link from when you first registered, that still works and you can edit your sessions that you signed up for. And with that, everybody, thank you and have a great rest of the day. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.